Welcome to the Shadows of Graveyard Echoes channel, where every tale drips with dread. Tonight we step into The Last Call, a chilling true story of a bartender's encounter with a stranger whose smile hides a sinister secret. Is the rusty anchor a safe haven or a trap? Dim the lights, lock your doors, and subscribe to face the fear. Dare you join us in the dark? The neon sign outside the rusty anchor flickered, casting a sickly yellow glow over the gravel parking lot. It was a dive bar, the kind you'd find tucked off a lonely highway stretch, where the air smelled of stale beer and gasoline. I'd been working the closing shift here for 2 years, pouring drinks for truckers, locals, and the occasional drifter who wandered in from the cold. The bar wasn't much, just a dimly lit room with a warped pool table, a jukebox stuck on Leonard Skynyrd, and a handful of regulars who knew each other's stories by heart. I liked the routine, though. The tips were decent, and I'd learned to handle the crowd. The loud talkers, the flirty old men, the quiet ones nursing their whiskeys in the corner. But working alone on weeknights, that was the hard part. No barback, no coworkers, just me and the hum of the fridge behind the counter. It was a Tuesday, well past 1 a.m., and the bar was dead. The last regular old Joe had stumbled out an hour ago, muttering about the weather. I was wiping down the counter, the rag leaving streaks on the chipped wood, when the door creaked open. The bell above it jingled faintly, and a gust of chilly air swept in. I looked up, expecting another tired trucker, but the man who walked in wasn't like anyone I'd seen before. He was tall, maybe in his late 40s, with a sharp jawline and hair slicked back like he'd stepped out of a magazine. His black turtleneck and long trench coat looked too polished for a place like this, but he wore them with a casual ease that made it seem intentional. His posture was perfect, shoulders back, spine straight, like he'd been trained to stand that way. He paused just inside the door, his eyes scanning the room slowly, taking in every detail. The peeling wallpaper, the flickering light above the pool table, the empty stools. Then he moved, swift and deliberate, crossing the floor to sit at the bar. I put on my bartender smile, the one I used for strangers. "What can I get you?" I asked, leaning against the counter. He didn't answer right away. His gaze flicked to the bottles behind me, lingering on the top shelf. "Macallan neat," he said, his voice smooth with a faint accent I couldn't place, maybe European. It wasn't the kind of order we got often. Most folks here stuck to Bud Light or Jack Daniels. I grabbed the bottle, pouring carefully. He watched me, not in a creepy way, but with an intensity that made my skin prickle. As I slid the glass toward him, he smiled, a warm, disarming smile that showed perfect teeth. "You like working here?" he asked, tilting his head slightly. It was a normal enough question, but something about the way he asked it felt off, like he already knew the answer and was testing me. I shrugged, keeping my tone light. "It's all right. Pays the bills, you know? Plus, I get to hear some wild stories." He chuckled, a low, rumbling sound. "I bet you do." He sipped his drink, his eyes never leaving mine. "Ever think about doing something bigger, getting out of this place?" I blinked, caught off guard. The question wasn't flirty, but it was personal in a way that felt out of place. I gave him my standard deflecting laugh. "I'm good for now. This town's got its charm." He nodded, but his smile faded, like my answer disappointed him. He didn't push though, just sipped his whiskey in silence. The jukebox switched to Sweet Home Alabama, filling the awkward quiet. I busied myself polishing glasses, but I could feel his eyes on me, steady and unblinking. After a long pause, he spoke again, his voice softer this time. "What time do you get off?" My stomach tightened. Up until then, he'd seemed like a nice guy, polished, maybe a bit intense, but not a creep. But that question? It came out of nowhere and it set off every alarm in my head. I forced a smile, keeping my tone vague. "Oh, you know, late. Depends on the night." Before he could say more, I turned away, wiping the counter with more force than necessary. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw him smile again. Not warm this time, but knowing, like he'd expected my reaction. He finished his drink in one smooth motion, then reached into his coat and pulled out a crisp $100 bill. He laid it on the counter gently, like it was nothing, and stood up. "Keep the change," he said, his voice almost a whisper. Then he walked out, the door jingling behind him. I stood there, staring at the bill. The bar was silent again, but the air felt heavier, like his presence had left something behind. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was just a weird encounter. Guys like that didn't come to places like the Rusty Anchor. And that $100 tip? Nobody tipped like that here, not even the truckers with extra cash. I pocketed the money, but my hands were shaking slightly. I figured I'd never seen him again. I was wrong. A week later, he came back. This time, he wasn't alone. A woman walked in beside him, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor. She was in her mid-30s, with sharp features and a trendy outfit, ripped jeans, a leather jacket that looked like it was trying too hard to be young. Her smile was wide, almost too wide, and her eyes locked onto mine the second she stepped inside. They crossed the room together, moving with a strange synchronicity, and sat at the bar. I set down napkins, keeping my expression neutral. Before I could ask for their order, the woman leaned forward, her smile growing even brighter. "You're so pretty," she said, her voice dripping with warmth. Her fingers brushed my arm as she spoke, lingering just a second too long. I laughed, more out of instinct than amusement. "Thanks," I said, stepping back slightly. Something about her felt wrong, too calculated, too eager. The man didn't say a word, just watched us with that same intense stare. I poured their drinks, another Macallan for him, a gin and tonic for her, and tried to keep the conversation light. But the woman wouldn't let up. She asked how long I'd been working, how old I was, where I lived. Her questions came fast, like she was reading from a script. At one point, she glanced at the man, and I swear they shared a look. Not a word, but a look that said everything. She turned back to me, lowering her voice. "I run an exclusive event club," she said, her eyes gleaming. "Private parties, high-end clients. We're always looking for fun, young people like you. You could make 10 grand in a weekend." My heart skipped a beat. 10 grand? It sounded like a scam, or worse. I forced a laugh, shaking my head. "Sounds too good to be true." She didn't blink. "It's real. Girls like you do great with us." Her smile never wavered, but it felt like a mask now, hiding something darker. Then casually she added, "Step outside for a sec. Someone's waiting who can explain it better." Every instinct screamed at me to say no. I straightened up, my voice firm. "I'm good, thanks." Just then, a group of rowdy truckers burst through the door, laughing and shouting. The woman's smile faltered just for a split second before she and the man stood up and left without another word. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. My hands were trembling as I texted my boss, telling him what happened. We agreed to keep an eye out, but there wasn't much else to do. They hadn't broken any laws, just creeped me out. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't done with me, and I was right. The Rusty Anchor's neon glow hides a chilling truth. The mysterious man and woman left their mark on the bartender, their sinister offer echoing in the fog. But the night isn't over. A new threat lurks in the shadows, ready to strike. Stay with us. The terror deepens. The Rusty Anchor felt different after that night. The jukebox still played its tired rotation of classic rock. The regulars still slouched over their beers. But I couldn't shake the unease that had settled into my bones. The man in the trench coat and the woman with the too perfect smile haunted my thoughts. Their words replaying like a bad song stuck in my head. My boss, Mike, had promised to swing by more often during my weeknight shifts, and he'd checked the security cameras, but the footage only showed the couple leaving the bar, their faces too shadowed to make out clearly. I tried to push it out of my mind, telling myself they were just weirdos passing through. But deep down, I knew better. It was a slow Thursday, just past 2 a.m., and the bar was empty. The neon sign outside buzzed faintly, its light flickering across the gravel lot. I was restocking the fridge, the cold air soothing my nerves, when I heard the crunch of tires outside. I glanced up, expecting a late-night trucker, but the lot was still. No headlights, no movement, just the faint hum of the highway in the distance. I shrugged it off and went back to stacking bottles, but then I heard it again, a low, deliberate crunch, like someone was walking slowly across the gravel. I stepped out from behind the counter, peering through the smudged window. The lot looked deserted, the pumps standing like silent sentinels under the flickering light. But something caught my eye, a glint of metal near the edge of the lot, where the gravel met the grass. I squinted, my breath fogging the glass, and realized it was a car. No, not parked, idling, its engine off, tucked just out of the neon's reach. It was a dark sedan, sleek and out of place, like it belonged in a city, not here. My pulse quickened. I told myself it could be nothing, a couple making out, a driver taking a nap. But the car's stillness unnerved me. It wasn't near the pumps, and no one had come inside. I grabbed my phone, ready to text Mike, but the signal was weak. One bar, then none. The bar's Wi-Fi was spotty at best, and I cursed under my breath. I moved closer to the door, keeping low, and scanned the lot again. That's when I saw him. A figure stood behind one of the pumps, half hidden in the shadows. He was tall, wearing a dark hoodie with the hood up, his hands buried in his pockets. I froze, my heart hammering. He wasn't moving, just standing there, his face obscured. I hadn't heard the door jingle, so he hadn't been inside. How long had he been out there? Had I missed him when I looked earlier? I backed away from the window, my mind racing. The bar was locked, but the back entrance, used for deliveries, wasn't always secure. I'd meant to tell Mike about the loose latch, but it had slipped my mind. I grabbed a heavy flashlight from under the counter, its weight reassuring in my hand, and moved toward the back to check the door. The hallway was dim, lit by a single flickering bulb, and every creak of the floorboards made me flinch. The back door was shut, but when I pushed against it, it gave slightly a faint rattle that sent a chill down my spine. I shoved a crate of empty bottles against it, hoping it would hold, and hurried back to the bar. The figure was still there, but now he was closer, standing just beyond the pump, his head tilted slightly like he was watching the door. My mouth went dry. There was no car near him, no reason for him to be there. I glanced at the sedan across the lot, its dark shape barely visible now, and a sick feeling twisted my gut. I dialed 911, but the call wouldn't connect. "Come on," I muttered, shaking my phone. The signal was gone completely. I was alone, miles from the nearest town, with no way to call for help. I told myself to stay calm, to think. Maybe he was just a drifter, harmless. But the way he stood, so still, so deliberate, felt wrong. Then the door jingled. I whipped around, my grip tightening on the flashlight. The man in the hoodie pushed inside, moving faster than I expected. He didn't look at me right away, just stood in the doorway, his head lowered. The hood hid his face, but I could see his hands, pale, knuckles white, like he was gripping something in his pockets. "Hey," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "We're closing soon. What do you need?" He didn't answer. He shuffled forward, his boots scuffing the floor, and stopped at the counter. Up close, I could smell him, something sharp like motor oil and sweat. He muttered something, his voice low and rushed. "Car broke down, just past the lot. Need a flashlight, maybe some gas?" I stared at him, my mind flashing back to the sedan. I'd been outside earlier and there was no car then. "Where's your car parked?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. He pointed vaguely toward the highway. "Out there, by the entrance." His voice was flat, like he was reciting lines. I glanced at the security monitor behind the counter, its grainy feed showing the lot. To my shock, there was a car now, a dark shape just beyond the pumps. My stomach dropped. I would have seen it before, I would have heard it pull in. "Need help," he said, leaning closer. His hood shifted slightly, and I caught a glimpse of his eyes, glassy, unblinking, like he was studying me. "Just a flashlight. Check the hood." I forced a smile, my heart pounding. "Let me call a tow truck for you," I said, reaching for the landline. He shook his head, too quick, his hand twitching in his pocket. No truck. Just help." His voice was sharper now, insistent. I glanced at the monitor again, and that's when I saw it. Movement near the car's rear bumper. A shadow, low to the ground, like someone was crouching. My blood ran cold. There was someone else out there. "I need to grab something from the back," I said, backing away slowly. "Wait here." I didn't wait for his response. I turned, moving toward the hallway, my hand already reaching for the panic button under the counter. The second I was out of his sight, I slammed my palm down on it. The alarm blared, a piercing wail that echoed through the bar. I braced myself, expecting him to charge after me, but instead, he did something worse. He laughed. Not a nervous laugh, not a surprised one. A slow, deliberate chuckle that made my skin crawl. I risked a glance back. He was standing there, his posture relaxed, his hood still hiding his face. "Smart," he said, almost to himself. Then, in one fluid motion, he turned and bolted out the door. I ran to the monitor, my hands shaking. The feed showed two figures now, sprinting not toward the car but into the woods beyond the lot. The sedan sat there, its lights off, its engine silent. I grabbed the flashlight and shone it through the window, my breath hitching. The car's passenger door was open. Someone else had been inside the whole time. The alarm was still screaming when Mike's truck pulled into the lot. I unlocked the door, nearly collapsing into his arms as I told him what happened. He checked the cameras with me, his face grim. The footage showed the man in the hoodie and another figure near the car, but their faces were blurred, unidentifiable. The sedan was still there when the police arrived, but the men were gone. No footprints, no trace. The cops ran the plates, stolen, reported missing from a town 2 hours away. I didn't sleep that night. The image of that open passenger door burned into my mind. Who was in there and why me? I told Mike I couldn't work alone anymore, and he agreed. But the fear lingered, a shadow that followed me every time I stepped into the Rusty Anchor. I thought it was over. I was wrong. The hooded man's laugh still haunts the Rusty Anchor, his accomplices vanishing into the fog. The bartender thought he escaped, but danger wears a familiar face. Can he trust those closest to him? Hold your breath. The nightmare isn't finished. The Rusty Anchor hadn't felt safe since that night with the man in the hoodie and the stolen sedan. I'd stopped working alone, and Mike, my boss, made sure someone was always around during my weeknight shifts. The bar's regulars noticed my jumpiness, but they didn't ask questions, just tipped a little extra, like they knew something was wrong. The police hadn't found the men from the security footage, and the sedan's trail went cold. Stolen cars, they said, were common around here. But I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't random. The man in the trench coat, the woman with the fake smile, the hooded figure, they were connected. I just didn't know how. It was a quiet Monday, just after midnight. The bar was slow, with only a couple of truckers nursing beers at the far end of the room. My coworker Sarah was on shift with me, restocking glasses while I manned the counter. Sarah was new, barely a month on the job, but she was chatty and kept the mood light. I liked her, even if her stories about her exes got old fast. The jukebox was playing Free Bird, its familiar chords blending with the hum of the fridge. I was starting to relax, thinking maybe the worst was behind me. Then I saw him. He was standing near the pool table, half hidden in the dim light. A man, maybe in his 30s, wearing a faded denim jacket and a baseball cap pulled low. He wasn't playing pool, wasn't drinking, just standing there, his hands in his pockets, his head tilted slightly toward me. I froze, my hand tightening on the rag I was using to wipe the counter. He didn't move, didn't look away. I told myself I was paranoid, that he was just another drifter. But the way he lingered, always just close enough to notice, set my nerves on edge. I glanced at Sarah, who was humming to herself, oblivious. "Hey," I whispered, nodding toward the man. "You know that guy?" She looked up, squinting. "Nah, don't think so, probably waiting for someone." She shrugged and went back to stacking glasses. I tried to brush it off, but every time I looked up, he was there, by the pool table, then near the jukebox, then closer to the bar. He never picked anything up, never spoke to anyone, just watched. I busied myself with the trucker's orders, hoping he'd leave, but he didn't. He kept circling, his movements slow and deliberate, like a predator sizing up its prey. My stomach churned. I thought about calling Mike, but my phone was in the back, and I didn't want to leave the counter. The bar's radio was on the fritz again, so I couldn't even buzz Sarah for help without shouting. I felt trapped, exposed under the flickering lights. Then, out of nowhere, a hand grabbed my arm. I gasped, nearly dropping a glass, and spun around. It was Sarah, her eyes wide, her smile too bright. "There you are," she said, her voice loud and cheerful, like we were old friends reuniting. I stared at her, confused. She'd been right next to me all night. "I've been looking everywhere for you," she went on, her grip tightening. The truckers glanced over, but they just chuckled, assuming we were joking. "What are you?" I started, but she cut me off, leaning in close. Her voice dropped to a whisper, urgent and low. "That guy's been watching you all night. He's got a phone out recording. Come with me." My blood ran cold. I glanced at the man in the denim jacket. He was still there, standing by the jukebox now, his head lowered. I couldn't see his hands, but the way he stood, so still, so focused, made my skin crawl. Sarah tugged at my arm, her smile never faltering. "Come on, let's go to the back. It's safer there." I hesitated, my mind racing. Sarah was new, but she'd been nothing but friendly. Maybe she'd seen something I hadn't. Maybe she was trying to help. I let her pull me toward the hallway, my heart pounding. She kept talking, her voice loud and bubbly, like she was putting on a show. "Remember that time we went to the lake? God, we had so much fun," she said, laughing. I didn't respond. I'd never been to a lake with her. I'd barely known her a month. We moved past the bar, past the truckers, toward the back hallway. The light was dimmer here, the walls lined with crates and empty kegs. Sarah's grip was firm, almost painful, and her chatter didn't stop. "You're gonna love this story I've got," she said, her voice echoing in the narrow space. I glanced back, hoping to see the man in the denim jacket, but the bar was out of sight now. The jukebox's music faded, replaced by the sound of our footsteps. "Sarah," I said, my voice shaking. "He's gone. We're good now. Let's go find Mike." She didn't slow down. "Not yet," she said, her smile tightening. "He's still out there lurking, trust me." She pulled me harder, her nails digging into my skin. I stopped, planting my feet, and tried to twist free. "Sarah, let go." She turned to face me, her expression changing. The bubbly smile was still there, but her eyes were cold, calculating. "Just a little further," she said, her voice low now, almost a hiss. "Come on." I looked around, my pulse racing. The hallway led to the back door, the one with the loose latch, the one we used for deliveries. Beyond that was the alley, dark and empty, with no cameras. My stomach dropped. This wasn't right. Sarah wasn't helping me. She was leading me somewhere bad. "Let go," I said, louder this time, yanking my arm. She held on, her smile faltering. "Don't make this hard," she whispered, her voice barely audible. I didn't think. I screamed, the sound echoing off the walls. "Help! Somebody!" Sarah's face twisted, her mask slipping completely. She lunged, trying to grab me again, but I stumbled back, crashing into a stack of crates. The noise was deafening, bottles clattering to the floor. I turned and ran, my shoes slipping on the slick tiles toward the bar. Behind me, Sarah shouted something, my name, clear as day. I hadn't told her my full name. I'd only ever given her my nickname. I burst into the bar, gasping. The truckers were on their feet, looking confused. "What's going on?" one of them asked, but I didn't stop. I grabbed the landline and dialed Mike, my hands shaking. "Get here now," I said when he picked up. "It's Sarah? I didn't finish. The truckers were staring past me toward the hallway. I turned, expecting to see Sarah, but it was the man in the denim jacket. He stood at the edge of the bar, his cap still low, his hands in his pockets. He didn't move, just watched me, his lips curling into a slow smile. Mike arrived 10 minutes later, followed by the police. Sarah was gone, vanished, like she'd never been there. The security footage told a worse story. It showed Sarah and the man in the denim jacket entering the bar together, hours before my shift started. They'd been watching me from the start, coordinating every move. The man's face was clear in one frame, but Sarah's was always turned away, like she knew where the cameras were. The cops called it a failed abduction attempt. They're still looking for them, but I know they won't find her. She knew too much, my name, my schedule, my habits. I quit the Rusty Anchor the next day. I don't go out at night anymore. Every time I close my eyes, I see her smile, hear her voice calling my name. And I wonder what would have happened if I'd followed her out that door. The Rusty Anchor's secrets linger in the silence. Did this tale make your heart race? Share your own creepy bar stories in the comments below. Like, subscribe, and hit the bell to uncover more nightmares. Click the next video to keep the chills coming. Stay wary, the night's not over.